So Satou Sabally got into it with Dirty Mustard Carrington yesterday after the Mercury smacked the Dallas Wings. And apparently Mustard and Alyssa was out drinking the night before. That's why Satou Sabally did the little gesture of keep drinking. It makes sense. Mustard, you got a drinking problem. You can't stop sipping. That's why you're so angry and weird all the time.
The WNBA is eating itself alive from the inside, and we're all just watching it happen. While the league should be celebrating unprecedented growth, record viewership, and genuine mainstream buzz, instead we're witnessing a slow-motion car crash, orchestrated by players who seem hell-bent on destroying everything they've worked decades to build. At the center of this chaos, DiJonai Carrington, a player who's turned professional basketball into her personal fight club, and somehow nobody with any real authority seems willing to stop her. This isn't about competitive fire or passionate play. This is about a systematic pattern of aggression that's turning WNBA games into WWE auditions, and it's happening while the league has never been more vulnerable to public perception. The most recent incident, a post-game confrontation between Carrington and Satou Sabally, perfectly encapsulates everything wrong with how the WNBA is handling its discipline problem.
Let's see how many buckets y'all put up too. Satou dropped 29-2 on your head. You only had 11 points. That's why you can't ball correctly, because you too busy sipping that stuff, and you mad Satou is a better baller than you, and she don't gotta wear 100 pounds of makeup, man. Hilarious, man. It all makes sense. And then we got Alyssa Smith over here chirping, defending her toxic girlfriend as usual, man, running her mouth, doing all this goofy stuff. Matter of fact, Alyssa, how many points did you put up? 4 points! 33% shooting, and you doing all this after the game? No wonder you can't ball correctly, because you too busy out drinking with Mustard Carrington. It all makes sense now, everybody.
But here's what makes this story even more infuriating. It's not just happening in a vacuum. It's happening during what should be the league's golden moment. Picture this scene. The final buzzer sounds after Phoenix Mercury demolishes the Dallas Wings 93-80. It should be routine. Players shake hands, head to the locker rooms, maybe exchange a few words about the game. Instead, DiJonai Carrington decides this is the perfect moment to turn a basketball court into a confrontation zone. She approaches Satou Sabally, not for any friendly post-game chat, but with the kind of energy that immediately puts everyone on high alert. What happened? Next was a masterclass in poor judgment and worse timing. Carrington, apparently unable to process that her team just got thoroughly outplayed, decided the solution was to get confrontational with an opponent who had nothing to do with Dallas's embarrassing performance. Sabally, to her credit, initially tried to dismiss Carrington with what witnesses described as a nonchalant wave, but Carrington wasn't having it. She kept pushing, kept escalating, until teammates had to physically separate them. The whole scene played out in front of cameras, fans, and league officials who should have been the first ones stepping in to shut it down. Instead, security seemed caught off guard. Coaches looked helpless. And once again, DiJonai Carrington walked away from a situation she created without facing any meaningful consequences. This wasn't heat-of-the-moment competition spilling over. This was calculated confrontation from someone who's made targeting opponents her signature move.
Doing all this dropping 4 points because y'all mad that Satou is a baller and better than both of you goofy scrubs will ever be. This is all you do, Mustard. All you can do is get talked about for doing controversial shit. You either arguing with people or taking players out on the court, man. But it makes sense now why Satou did this, and all the Twitter rants and all the crashing out in a terrible attitude, man. You can't stop sipping that stuff, Mustard. See how it all just made. Thank you, Satou Sabally, for this, man. We needed to figure out why Mustard is so insufferable, man. Dallas Wings, hold this L.
But here's the part that should terrify WNBA executives. This incident didn't happen during a tense playoff atmosphere game between bitter rivals. This was a regular season matchup where one team clearly outclassed the other, and somehow that routine result triggered what looked like the opening moments of a heavyweight boxing match. If this is how players react to standard losses, what happens when the stakes actually matter? What makes this even more concerning is that DiJonai Carrington's post-game theatrics with Sabally weren't an isolated incident. They were just the latest entry in a growing portfolio of controversial moments that paint a troubling picture. This is a player who's built a reputation not on clutch shots or defensive stops, but on pushing boundaries until something breaks. The hair-pulling incident with Sarah Ashley Barker, the flagrant foul controversy with Skylar Diggins that had even her own team's announcers questioning what they just witnessed. Each incident follows the same script: unnecessary contact, escalated aggression, and then a league response that's softer than a participation trophy speech. What makes Carrington's behavior particularly deliberate is how calculated it appears. These aren't accidental collisions or emotional outbursts that happen in the heat of competition. Watch the replays, study the body language, analyze the timing. There's a calculated quality to these confrontations that suggests someone who knows exactly what they're doing and exactly how far they can push before facing real consequences. The problem is, those consequences never seem to come. The league keeps treating these incidents like isolated moments of poor judgment, but when you line them up chronologically, a different picture emerges. This is someone who's learned that she can basically do whatever she wants on and off the court as long as she's willing to pay a small fine and sit through a brief lecture about sportsmanship. It's like having a repeat shoplifter who keeps getting caught but only faces a stern talking to from security. Even more troubling is how these incidents seem to be escalating in both frequency and intensity. What started as hard fouls and trash, talk has evolved into hair-pulling and post-game confrontations. If the league doesn't intervene with real authority soon, where does this trajectory end? At what point does someone get seriously hurt because the WNBA decided that maintaining the illusion of having everything under control was more important than actually controlling anything? And speaking of control, here's another angle that makes this situation even more frustrating. While DiJonai Carrington was busy turning basketball courts into battlefields, her teammate Paige Bueckers was quietly putting together the kind of rookie season that should have been dominating headlines. For all the right reasons. The #1 draft pick has been delivering performances that remind everyone why she was considered a generational talent, breaking records and providing the Dallas Wings with their first legitimate reason for optimism in years. Bueckers came into the league with unprecedented hype and somehow managed to exceed expectations, posting historic numbers through her first 5 games that no rookie in WNBA history had achieved. She's been everything the Wings hoped for and more. A legitimate star who can score, facilitate, and carry herself with the kind of professionalism that elevates everyone around her. In a perfect world, her emergence would be the story everyone's talking about. The narrative that drives coverage and brings new fans to the sport. Instead, her breakout performances keep getting buried under headlines about her teammates' latest disciplinary incident. Every time Bueckers does something spectacular, on the court, it gets overshadowed by whatever chaos Carrington created after the final buzzer. It's like having an award-winning performance in a play where someone keeps setting the theater on fire during the curtain call. The cruel irony is that the Dallas Wings desperately need positive attention. After finishing last season with a humiliating 9-31 record, they've been rebuilding their entire identity around the idea that Paige Bueckers could transform their culture and their competitiveness. Early returns suggested that strategy was working. Bueckers looked like exactly the kind of franchise-changing talent who could make Dallas relevant again. But instead of celebrating their rookie phenom and building momentum around her success, the Wings find themselves constantly doing damage control for Carrington's behavior. Every post-game interview becomes an opportunity for reporters to ask about the latest incident rather than discuss Bueckers' development or the team's progress. It's sabotage by association, and it's exactly the kind of self-inflicted wound that can derail even the most promising rebuilding project. But wait, there's more to this story that makes it even more disturbing. Here's what makes DiJonai Carrington's behavior particularly calculated and frankly cowardly. She doesn't pick fights randomly. Watch who she targets and who she carefully avoids, and you'll see someone who's mastered the art of strategic intimidation. She goes after rookies, players she considers physically overmatched, or veterans who she knows won't escalate to the same level she's willing to reach. It's targeting with a scouting report. You'll never see Carrington trying this nonsense with someone like Ija Wilson or Brianna Stewart. Players who have both the physical presence and the veteran status to shut down her antics immediately. She's not approaching Candace Parker or Sue Bird with the same energy she brings to confronting younger, smaller players. There's a reason for that. And it's not because she respects their games more than anyone else's. The Satou Sabally confrontation fits this pattern perfectly. While Sabally is certainly not someone to be taken lightly, she's also not known as an enforcer or someone who's going to respond to provocation with equal aggression. Carrington read the situation, identified someone she could push around without, facing serious retaliation, and then executed her plan with the kind of precision that would be impressive if it weren't so toxic. This selective aggression exposes the fundamental cowardice behind Carrington's tough guy persona. Real competitive. Fire burns equally against all opponents. It doesn't discriminate based on who's most likely to back down. But Carrington's version of intensity is carefully calibrated to maximize her ability to intimidate while minimizing any real risk to herself. She's turned targeting into a science, and somehow the league keeps treating it like it's just passionate. Basketball. The most damaging part of this behavior isn't even the individual incidents. It's how it creates a culture where younger players feel unsafe and veteran stars start questioning whether they want to deal with this level of nonsense. If you're a rookie trying to establish yourself in the league, do you really want to worry about getting targeted by someone who's made her reputation on intimidating players exactly like you? And if you're a superstar with options, how long? Do you tolerate playing in a league that can't protect you from manufactured drama? The answer to those questions brings us to the real problem at the heart of this situation. Cathy Engelbert's response to the DiJonai Carrington situation reveals everything wrong with how the WNBA approaches discipline and league management. While players are literally having to be separated by teammates during post-game confrontations, the commissioner seems more concerned with crafting carefully worded statements about sportsmanship than actually addressing the behavior that's making those statements necessary. Every time Carrington creates another incident, the league's response follows the same predictable pattern: a brief investigation, a modest fine, maybe a one-game suspension if the optics are particularly bad, and then a generic statement about high standards and professional conduct. It's discipline theater, designed to look like accountability while avoiding any real consequences that might actually change behavior. The problem with this approach goes beyond just enabling Carrington's antics. It sends a message to every other player in the league that the rules are essentially suggestions, and as long as you're willing to pay the relatively small financial penalty, you can basically do whatever you want. That's not leadership. That's abdication of responsibility dressed up in corporate speak. What makes Engelbert's weak response even more frustrating is the timing. The WNBA is experiencing unprecedented growth in viewership, fan engagement, and mainstream media coverage. This should be the moment when league leadership is most focused on protecting and nurturing that momentum, ensuring that new fans see a product worthy of their attention and investment. Instead, those new fans are watching players literally fighting each other while the commissioner issues statements that could have been written by a chatbot programmed to avoid saying anything meaningful. The contrast with other professional sports leagues is stark. When NBA players step out of line, Adam Silver doesn't hesitate to hand down suspensions that actually matter. When NFL players create PR nightmares, Roger Goodell responds with consequences that change behavior. But when WNBA players turn basketball games into episodes of reality television, Cathy Engelbert responds like she's managing a conflict resolution workshop rather than running a professional sports league. And here's where this story gets even more maddening. The most infuriating aspect of the DiJonai Carrington situation is how it's undermining what should be the WNBA's breakthrough moment. The league has spent decades fighting for legitimacy, respect, and mainstream attention. They've finally achieved all three, largely thanks to the emergence of stars like Caitlin Clark, who brought new audiences and unprecedented media coverage to women's basketball. This growth didn't happen by accident. It was the result of years of incremental progress, improved marketing, better television coverage, and most importantly, players who understood that their behavior on and off the court directly impacted how the public perceived their sport. The previous generation of WNBA stars built their reputations on excellence, professionalism, and the kind of compelling basketball that made casual fans into devoted followers. Now, just when that foundation is starting to pay real dividends, players like Carrington are actively working to undermine it. Every hair-pulling incident, every post-game confrontation, every moment that makes the WNBA look more like a soap opera than a professional sports league represents a step backward from the progress previous generations fought to achieve. The timing couldn't be worse. New fans who might be giving women's basketball a chance for the first time don't have the context or loyalty to overlook drama that overshadows the actual games. They're not invested enough in specific players or teams to tolerate behavior that makes the league look unprofessional. These are the viewers the WNBA desperately needs to retain if they want to build on their recent momentum, and instead they're being exposed to manufactured controversies that have nothing to do with basketball excellence. Corporate sponsors, television executives, and media partners are also paying attention. They've invested in the WNBA based on the assumption that the league is trending upward in terms of both performance and professionalism. Repeated incidents that generate negative headlines and controversial social media discussions threaten those relationships and could impact everything from broadcast deals to endorsement opportunities. But the ripple effects extend even further than most people realize. DiJonai Carrington's behavior doesn't exist in a vacuum. It creates ripple effects that impact other players, teams, and the league's overall competitive environment. When one player is allowed to consistently cross lines without meaningful consequences, it inevitably influences how others approach their own conduct and competitive strategies. Younger players, especially rookies trying to establish themselves, face an impossible choice. Do they focus purely on basketball excellence and risk being targeted by players who've made intimidation their calling card? Or do they adopt a more aggressive approach as a form of self-protection? Neither option is ideal, but both represent how Carrington's unchecked behavior is actively corrupting the league's competitive culture. Veteran players face their own dilemma. They can either continue modeling professionalism while watching troublemakers dominate headlines, or they can start matching aggression with aggression to protect themselves and their teammates. The fact that players like Skylar Diggins-Smith seem hesitant to directly confront Carrington's behavior suggests that even established stars are uncertain about how to navigate this environment. Team dynamics are also being affected. Coaches have to spend time and energy addressing extracurricular drama rather than focusing on basketball development. Front office executives have to consider not just talent and fit when making roster decisions, but also which players might create discipline problems or become targets for harassment. Organizations like the Dallas Wings find themselves in the impossible position of trying to build a positive culture while employing someone who seems determined to generate negative attention. The competitive balance of games themselves is being compromised. When players know that certain opponents are willing to escalate situations beyond normal basketball contact, it changes how they approach those matchups. Some players become overly cautious to avoid confrontation, while others feel pressured to respond with their own aggression. Either way, the focus shifts from pure basketball to managing interpersonal conflicts that shouldn't exist in the first place. And that brings us to the ultimate question that every WNBA fan should be asking right now. The DiJonai Carrington situation represents more than just one player's poor judgment. It's a test case for whether the WNBA can maintain the standards necessary to sustain its recent growth. The league has reached a critical juncture where its response to this type of behavior will largely determine whether it continues ascending toward mainstream relevance or slides back into niche status. Professional women's basketball has never had more visibility, more investment, or more potential for long-term success. Television ratings are up, social media engagement is exploding, and for the first time in league history, there's genuine buzz around multiple teams and players. This is the foundation that could support decades of continued growth, but only if the league protects it with appropriate leadership and accountability. The risk of losing this momentum is real and immediate. Sports entertainment options for consumers are virtually unlimited, and audiences who feel like they're watching manufactured drama rather than authentic competition will simply choose something else. The WNBA can't afford to alienate fans who are just beginning to invest emotionally in the league's success. Young girls who look up to WNBA players as role models deserve better than watching their heroes get into post-game confrontations that overshadow their athletic achievements. Parents who might encourage their daughters to follow women's basketball will need to see examples of excellence and professionalism, not behavior that makes the sport look chaotic and unpredictable. The stakes extend beyond just entertainment value. The WNBA's recent success has created opportunities for female athletes at every level, from youth programs getting increased funding to college players having more realistic professional aspirations. If the league's reputation suffers because of preventable controversies, those opportunities could disappear as quickly as they emerged. So, what's the solution? Fixing the DiJonai Carrington problem requires the kind of decisive action that the WNBA has been reluctant to take. Half measures and gentle warnings have proven ineffective, and continuing down that path will only encourage more players to test the boundaries of acceptable behavior. Real consequences need to match the severity of the behavior. Multi-game, suspensions for flagrant fouls, significant fines for post-game confrontations, and zero tolerance for any actions that compromise player safety or league integrity. The goal shouldn't be punishment for its own sake, but establishing clear standards that everyone understands and respects. League leadership also needs to communicate directly with players about expectations and consequences. Generic statements about sportsmanship aren't enough. There need to be specific conversations about what behaviors will and won't be tolerated, along with clear explanations of what players can expect if they choose to cross those lines. The officials and security personnel need better training and clearer authority to intervene before situations escalate. Too many of these incidents could have been prevented if someone with authority had stepped in during the early stages rather than waiting for players to separate themselves. Most importantly, the league needs to remember what's at stake. The WNBA has worked too hard and come too far to let individual players sabotage the collective success that everyone has earned. Protecting that success requires making difficult decisions about players who consistently put their own drama ahead of the league's well-being. The DiJonai Carrington situation is ultimately a choice for the WNBA: continue enabling behavior that undermines everything they've built, or take the kind of decisive action that protects the league's future. One path leads to continued growth and mainstream acceptance. The other leads back to irrelevance and missed opportunity. The decision should be obvious, but so far the league seems determined to take the harder path for no good reason. The WNBA has never been closer to achieving its full potential. All it needs now is leadership willing to protect that potential from the players who seem determined to destroy it. Time will tell whether Kathy Engelberg and the league office understand what's truly at stake, or whether they'll continue treating serious problems like minor inconveniences until it's too late to save what they've spent decades trying to build.